popcorn. This is the only dance we know on popcorn.
Popcorn.
We have popcorn today. It's cheesy popcorn.
It's cheesy, all right.
Yeah, and it's just like the show. Yeah. So, by the way, I just want to. This is Patty McDaniel, biology teacher extraordinaire here.
Oh, thank you.
And look, it's a woman on our show. What happened?
Whoa, breaking the gender barriers.
Exactly.
We're here to break down those barriers.
Well, I was
folks.
just sort of reflecting that you were one of the original creators of this show, and it's when we first pitched this show, was it supposed to be just pop culture in general, or was
it was going to be a show about nothing.
Show about nothing? So I guess
that was our pitch.
Conceivably,
remember?
We could have worked in anything we want. Like we wanted to talk about biology
idea.
one week, we could have done that. But
that was the
somehow
idea.
that show wasn't picked up. And then we repackaged it, and then it did get picked up with Skylar. And I don't know, I guess you were busy or something at the time. I'm sure we would. But anyway, hopefully we'll see you back. But
thanks,
today
man.
we've got a special show to discuss, which I only know about from you and from my Entertainment Weekly.
That's where you get the news.
It's the current, I don't know why I need to show this, but it's Matt Damon. He's bald, people. Anyway, the current issue of Entertainment Weekly, I have this thing called the Must List. And yeah, I guess it's always 10 things. So they have number 6, Naked and Afraid. So I'm going to read this and then we'll talk about this show. It's a reality show. Who needs civilization? This is what EW says. Or clothes. Each week, the two totally nude strangers must survive in an extreme environment for 21 days with no supplies on a riveting, bonkers in the best way reality series that delivers high octane adventure and lots of artfully blurred naughty bits. Discovery Channel Sundays. It says 10 here. It must be 9
it
our
is.
time. Okay.
It is.
So that's the setup. I can't imagine this is going to go on for 10 years or so unless they really. But hey, right? It's going now, right?
It's
so
going now, and I think
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of good buzz about it. I first saw. This is the first season for that show, and only one of those sort of seasonal things where they have maybe 8 episodes,
Right.
something like that. I think we're either getting to the finale or just have had the finale. But anyway, taking these strangers and putting them in an extreme environment for 21 days. And the whole point is getting out alive after 21 days. There's no money involved, which makes it something
so
that I was
weird.
really interested
Can't they
in.
just give them a trophy or something?
Well, you're working to raise your survival rating
Yeah.
once you're
They should give them a
finished.
trophy of like 2 people like emaciated and just huddling together. That's your instead of a giant proud Oscar figure. This is your trophy of these 2 golden. Yeah.
It does run a series of them, what they look like at the beginning of 21 days
man.
and at the end of 21 days after all the weight loss and
And
everything.
you told me a
they've gone
dude lost
through.
44 pounds.
44 pounds in 21 days in the most recent
Yikes.
episode that I saw.
You know,
so.
somebody's watching this going, hey, the Naked and Afraid diet. I think I'm
That's
going to try.
exactly
I'll
right.
just have somebody drop me off nowhere.
I always tell people field courses, international field courses are great if you want to lose weight.
That's the problem. We always can go, yeah, even if I leave my refrigerator empty, I can go out and get something. I don't actually have to learn how to boil water. It is so crazy.
Right, and have a mechanism to be able to boil water.
Yeah, we
even
always
for
think of like
survival.
Castaway or Gilligan's Island someplace. I assuming they're just never dropping them down a place where there's coconuts everywhere, that kind of thing, right?
No, I mean,
Okay.
not that I've seen so far. It really is 2 strangers that have some kind of background either in the military or survival skills, survival school, that sort of thing, that come together and their whole goal is to survive with absolutely no clothing. So they drop,
Really naked,
trowel,
yeah.
from minute 1, no shoes, nothing. They're each allowed 1 survival item, and that's it for 21 days. And the goal is they're given a primitive map, and they have to make their way to a takeout point at the end of 21 days to be extracted, unless there
okay.
is a life-threatening emergency that occurs within the 21-day time.
And you told me that they're driven out, dropped in separate places, so the map kind of guides them so they can get to where, because otherwise you could go off in the completely
Yeah,
wrong direction.
I mean,
yeah.
it doesn't really show how they find each other, but the assumption is they're not dropped off together in a vehicle in the same location, whatever that vehicle is, a boat, a helicopter, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then they do come together. It doesn't appear to be like a day of walking or anything, but
Okay.
a certain amount of time where they come to a meeting point, that's where they find each of them the survival item they chose and a map. But it's a very primitive map that says sort of here's where you are now and here's where you must be at the end of 21-day period.
Rocks, trees, person.
That's pretty much what it's like. That's right.
So tell us about we talked earlier about this, and you said there's always some interesting sort of gender portrayals on the show, some things we might not expect.
Yeah, I think it's really, I watch a lot of television for different reasons, and it's one of those situations where I think it's a really interesting study in this particular reality television show, because it looks at not only physical demands, the emotional, right, and cognitive demands placed on you in trying circumstances, and then it also looks at gender roles and expectations. When you put a male and a female together who are total strangers and they are naked and afraid. So I think it's
because it's sort of like, you told me something like the guy always is like, I'm gonna have to carry her or whatever.
It's really, to pick the people, they do extensive profiling of them, physical, emotional, mental profiles, testing to make sure they're up for the challenge. And then, as you might expect, they each come in with sort of preconceived ideas about what to expect from the other person. And it's interesting to me that patterns have emerged throughout the season with male expectations and observations versus female expectations and observations. And I always am really curious from the get-go how when they first are walking toward each other and seeing each other for the first time, they are, of course, absolutely naked, no shoes, no nothing. Doesn't matter what the weather is like. The first thing that the female usually says is, he looks like a strong male that will be able to help out with some of the heavier tasks. And typically the first thing the male says is, the first thing I think when I see her is, not bad, a pretty attractive female.
And she's naked.
And she's naked. What
she's not even afraid yet.
Be better? What could be better? But I think it's really interesting because, to this day, it harkens back to sort of like what we would expect, since I'm a biologist, in terms of evolutionary history of humans on the planet, where a female's looking at certain things that say fitness for her, and a male is looking for certain things that say reproduction for him. So.
And then the guys usually just break down and become
that has.
wusses.
I mean, I'm not portraying a gender bias, but my observations are, and I've also talked to other people independently. And they said the exact same thing, that throughout the season, interesting patterns have emerged wherein the male at the outset is concerned and worried about having to carry, literally and figuratively, this female for 21 days, and he'd rather be by himself. And as it typically ends up at the end of the 21 days, the male has often broken down during the 21 days physically or emotionally, and it ends up being a female who, in many cases, sort of carries them through to the end of it. I've even seen an episode where a male had to be extracted for making a very poor decision and drinking water that was contaminated when she knew better not to. He has to be extracted with a life-threatening condition. She chooses to stay on her own instead of throwing in the towel, and makes it up into the last couple of days before she then has to be extracted herself. But it's fascinating in many respects what humans can endure physically, and then all the other things thrown in, right? The gender roles, the emotional, and mental sort of stresses that you have from being in those conditions that you have very little control over.
It's not your usual, oh, I don't like Susie because she said this. And I'm thinking of like Big Brother.
Not your typical, no, and that's one of the things that drew me to that. And so I ended up thinking to myself, well, this is hardcore. This is about as hardcore as I get. And I talked to a couple of other people, and they were like, but why are they naked? You know, what's the point of naked? I mean, and my response was, well, I mean, everybody needs a shtick these days.
Yeah.
But part of it might be you're really trying to get humans back to the most basic, primitive part of their nature, historically, where humans had nothing except what they made themselves. And that's how these individuals are, in the most primitive, rudimentary conditions that we would be expected to find humans on the planet and see if they can survive those conditions.
And that's an interesting sort of cycle. Yeah, it sort of strips you down even further psychologically.
I
to
like
have
that.
No clothes.
I like that
And then
vein.
to see, you get to witness, do they make clothes or not? You know, because you know that is a thing where like it seems weird. I mean, obviously the shoes, that's a very practical thing.
Right.
The other kind of stuff is sort of just like it's an element of civilization to have clothes, and you know, or at least the way we define it. But you know, you look at something like what is it, like the Lord of the Flies or whatever, where they start to like wear masks and stuff. It's sort
And
of
paint
like
themselves
I'm gonna like
accordingly.
dehumanize myself and that kind of thing. You know.
Right. And some of them do choose, you know, to weave things or find something, you know, a palm fronds that can be made into something, and some not, you know, and part of it is based on what you have available to you.
Right.
Some, in all honesty, of what I've seen, initially there's a physical encounter and sort of checking each other out initially, and after that, it's like that's the least of your concern, is that your partner there is naked, because you have so many other things to contend with that becomes a really, you know, insignificant part of what's going on for them.
And by the way, those guys are crazy if they're thinking, yeah, I wish she wasn't here so I could be by myself, and because that's
I've
going to
heard
drive
that.
you the craziest. You're going to start talking to a volleyball if you're by yourself. That's going to be
And-
your best friend.
And that happens anyway, even with somebody else there with you. And a lot of times from lack of food or lack of water, right? It's
Yeah.
amazing how quickly the strongest individuals on the planet can start breaking down when
Yeah.
put in those conditions. So
was that?
fascinating. Fascinating.
Let's talk
What?
to the rocks.
What? Get off me.
All right, folks. Well, thanks, Patty. And,
Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, stick around for more popcorn.